This week on the 167, we're talking about we church and not me church. Welcome to the 167.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
Hey, welcome back to the 167. I'm Pastor Lucas Motley, the discipleship pastor at New Life Community Church. I'm joined by Senior Pastor Rick George.
Senor
Pastor.
Pastor. Or the El Pastor at La Coretta. Shout out to La Coretta. Good to be here this morning.
If you're El Pastor, it means you come with pineapple.
I do. Sometimes I just wear a pineapple suit around here. So.
Ooh. And then joining us today is Carissa Motley, my lovely wife, and one of our worship leaders here at New Life Community Church.
Good morning.
Hey, before we get started today, we want to shout out one of our listeners, Alan Vonderschmidt. And I can't help it, but I'm going to go Vonderschmidt.
Hey.
But Alan, thanks for your encouraging email this week. Alan loves the podcast and was listening this week, and so we just appreciate the encouragement. If you want a shout out here on the podcast, you can email me, lucas@newlifegardener.com, and just tell me all about how much you love to hear Carissa and Pastor Rick and everybody else come on the show.
I feel like there should be some formal shout for a shout out. I don't know. It's just you say his name.
Like a barbaric yelp where you're like,
well,
"Yarr!"
no, that's not what I was thinking, but
You have to spell his name like A-L-L-E-N, Alan.
that okay. Alan, there you go. That
There's
was
your
it.
shout out.
All right.
All right, so this week...
The shout out is actually longer than the podcast.
And that's all the time we have for today on the 167. Join us next week now. So this week we're continuing in our series, What's in It for Me? And so I just wanted to kind of touch on this a little bit this week, is touching on that concept, what's in it for me? Because I'm kind of struck. I love that you're couching these things, our five core values in this series about what's in it for me. I just wrote down the question, tell me a little bit about there. Let's talk about that. What is it like serving in the kingdom? You know, people often think about when they come to church, oh yeah, I'm contributing to the church or I'm serving the kingdom of God. It's a huge drain on my life. It's energy. But when we're talking about this, it's about what's actually in it for you. So when you guys think about serving in the kingdom, what do you think what are some of the benefits of that? It talks about like the benefits of Christ and doing that. Why do we kind of, as a church, I don't know if we focus on that as much. Does it feel selfish if we're saying like, well, no, I serve because it benefits me, but really the teachings of Christ are meant for that.
Yeah. So I think the challenge in life, and I think I've mentioned this before, we tend, as people, to look at whatever we're about to do, and we tend to say, okay, what's going to happen if I do this? Okay, instead of, well, what's going to happen if I don't do it? So another way to look at that is, what am I going to miss out on if I don't jump in and serve? What's going to happen if I don't fellowship? What am I missing out on? We don't look at that side. We typically look at, okay, well, what's the bad side? What's it going to cost me?
Yeah.
Instead of what am I going to benefit from it? Okay, and when you flip that around, it's like, well, what am I going to miss out on if I don't make this investment? And so in a financial world, people are like, oh man, if I would have just invested in Microsoft back, I had an opportunity and I thought, that's never going to work.
Yeah.
Right? And so
This guy in his garage making computers.
And so I guess a better way to look at it is, okay, when I get to the end of my life, what are the things that I want to do now so I don't get there to say, oh, I wish I would have spent more time developing relationships. Okay.
Yeah.
So there is something in it for us. And yes, it benefits the body of Christ, and it's not an either or. It's both and.
It's funny that you mentioned that because our kids watch this children's show called the Tuttle Twins. Shout out Tuttle Twins. but it's kind of funny they couch.
T-U-T-T. It's like another 5 minutes. I don't even know how to spell
Here we
total
go.
twins.
You were on the right track.
But they have this episode where they're trying to teach them like saving today will influence you in the future, and so they get to meet their future selves. And so this one kid just goes like they're in a kind of a jam. And he goes, "I pledge now that I will do 100 push-ups each day," and he gets down and starts doing push-ups, and then his future self all of a sudden has these huge biceps, and then they're trying to explain that concept that you're just talking about now, that what you're doing today is actually going to affect who you are in the future. So if you want it in the future, you should start today.
Yeah. So I'll put you on the spot. Have you started reading the book that the worship team's going through?
I actually, yes, I pre-read the whole thing.
So it talks about the
so
future
it
self,
does,
right?
yeah.
In the very, so
Absolutely.
there you go.
It's thinking about who you want to be.
Shout out to future self. F-U-T.
Careful that spelling.
Yeah. Whoa. Hey.
What was the book called?
The worship team is going to be doing a group study on a book called Spiritual Disciplines. So we're digging into that in the month of September.
I know Andrew started doing that. I said, "Stay in your lane, buddy. I'm the discipleship pastor." No, I love it.
Yeah, I just kind of hijacked the.
That's
took it right off.
listen. That's all for the kingdom. We're all growing for the kingdom.
Yeah. So what about you? What's something that how do you see the relationship between things that benefit us, and why are we not necessarily always teaching scripture that way, or why do we not see that as churchgoers?
I mean, we talk about this a lot in terms of Christianity, but I think it's the long haul. It's if I'm not immediately in its feelings, if I don't feel like it, like I will be honest, every Sunday we have a young adult life group that meets in our house Sunday nights. And usually about 3 p.m. on Sunday, I go, I wish we weren't doing this because I'm tired, right? Because it's, it's a thing in our schedule. It's a thing we have to do. And it's, once we get into it and everybody gets there and we have a discussion, it's great, right? I love it, but I have to kind of psych myself up for it every time. And so I think that that's how we view serving a lot of the time, is like, oh, it's another thing that I got to do. It's another thing in my schedule. It's another thing that's taken me, but it's, we got to flip that mindset and look at, it does have benefits, right? It does have a way to connect us with other people too, that is going to be valuable in the kingdom.
And my thing that I'm always struck with in this is, and you and I have talked about this, but I feel like Christians have a sense of guilt about it sometimes, where it's like, oh, this shouldn't feel good. And I'm like, no, it absolutely should.
Right.
Like we would go on a mission trip and people would be like, I just built this house for these people, and like I have way more than they do, and what did I even do? It's like, well, I just did a little thing for them. And I'm like, yes, but you did a little thing for them. Mm-hmm. It's okay to feel good about that. That's not why you came, and so even in serving, it's when you're reconnecting with the way that God's made you, that should feel good. Like it should feel like a workout. Like, yes, it was tough, but at the end of it, maybe you're a little sore, but you also feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
So where do you think, so we were talking about the concept this week of we church, not me church. So the concept of fellowship here at New Life Community Church. And so you were talking about areas where we value our family over our individual preferences. So we've all been in church work for a while. Where do you see churches in general, or specifically New Life, where do you see us most gravitate towards our personal preference, and where do you see us gravitate most towards valuing the family?
Well, what separates churches, I mean, why there are so many churches, really two big things. So music, okay, so we gravitate towards, well, I like this.
Right.
So that's my personal preference.
Yep.
And when you break it down, I mean, the singing part of the church life is about 20 minutes, maybe. Charismatic churches, maybe 2 hours. I don't know. But
That's like
somewhere
I've been in
between
some
20
churches.
minutes and 2 hours.
but it's 20, 30 minutes of our time together is singing. So it's not a massive part, but we've elevated it to say, I don't like that style. Okay, so it's stylistically, don't like it. I want that. It's a preference.
It's vibes.
So you're not singing the songs that I like, or the volume that I like it, or the way that I like it. And so I'm going to go find a place that I like. So that's a lot of the me stuff. And then stylistically in preaching, So there are people who like expository preaching, some that don't, some that would prefer, topical, felt needs kind of, and so it's like, oh, you don't even go through the Bible. So we're gonna go. I like digging deep. Really? Well, do you apply anything? No, I just like digging deep.
I like the knowledge.
Yeah, and so it's really about those two big areas, and everything else.
And everything. I think it's a lot too, like those two things also connect with personality. I think people get really hung up on, do I like that singer?
Yeah.
Do I like that pastor? Do I like that small group leader? Do I like that? Like, do I connect with them, or do I just jive with their personality? A lot of times we base our preferences on personality, right? Like that's how we pick our friends. Do I get along with this person? Do we have things in common? Does the vibe feel good? I think we bring that into church,
Yeah,
right?
we do.
Do I like that? Do I like that pastor? Do I like the way he preaches? Do I like his style? Do I like his shoes? Do I like, right? Like people get hung up on all kinds of things. And like you said, we've all been around church for a while. We've all heard crazy things that people complain about. Like crazy. So yeah, and I would agree. Music has been contentious for my whole life in the church. Like Lucas and I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and so we went through the whole what people call the worship wars, right? Where it's like we were changing from old hymnals in the church I grew up with to contemporary worship, and that was a huge battle. That was a huge fight.
What a journey.
People left the church over 20 years ago. That was a big phase we went through. And it
we've
continues.
progressed.
Yeah.
So it's really not the worship wars anymore. It's the coffee creamer wars.
It's right.
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 So what? You don't
I
have
love that you called that out on
So we don't
Sunday.
have the
We don't have hazelnut.
hazelnut. And it's
Why
like,
do we
I don't-
only have vanilla? Listen, that vanilla creamer is legit.
Yes,
it is
it's like-
good.
I don't know if I would call that progressing.
We're
but
just focusing on different things.
All the people that complained about the hymns to me, they all drank their coffee black.
Yeah. Shout out to black coffee.
There you
Yeah,
go.
black coffee.
No, I think that's the same. I think it really is the focus thing, and I think that most of it stems from insecurity. Like I said, with what I do with discipleship and stuff like that, a lot of it, I get a lot of the where it's you and I will have this conversation where you'll come in and be like, this person never got. I'm like, I have a list of all the times I have reached out to this person, and people get in a cycle or a loop
Yeah.
where they get embarrassed about something, they get just turned off about something or other, and it's like they start to withdraw, and it's like nobody's reaching out to me, and it's one of those things like, we are reaching out to you, we offer you all of these things, and it's that benefit. If you were on a serve team, you would have
feel more connected.
you would feel so much more connected. You'd feel invested in what we're doing. If you were in a life group, you would have people, because a lot of that time I went through a crisis and no one was there. And I'm like, if you were in a life group, you would have somebody there.
Yeah. And, at the risk of over spiritualizing this whole idea, I will say that a bulk of that really is tied back into an attack of the enemy to create disunity
Yeah.
or disconnectedness among people.
Yeah.
And so what happens, and I've seen it so many times over 25 years, of someone who loves the church. So they love New Life. They're serving here. They're plugged in here. Like building relationships here. This is a great church. I love, they're all like, shout out to New Life, and they're
Right.
like, I love this place. And then some little something happens and they got overlooked, or they didn't get recognized, or they didn't get followed. They missed a couple of Sundays and nobody even
Yep.
noticed, and the
Yep.
enemy like jumps in on that and says,
Yeah.
oh, see,
Yeah.
they don't care. And then those wheels start spinning, and then it becomes, we're all susceptible.
Yeah.
Like, this
Yeah.
is not judgment,
Yeah.
right? Then we start thinking me.
Yeah.
Like, well, what about me? And they didn't reach out to me. And then because the enemy wants to bring out that selfishness,
Yeah.
when God wants to bring out the selflessness.
Right.
And so that inner battle, and then the enemy starts bringing out the me, right? And then it's right down the...
There's a preaching thing there about the enemy that
Yeah.
we have not tapped into yet.
The enemy, me. Yeah, there you go.
I think a lot of times it's, you said self-centeredness, and I think there's a lot of times we get offended.
Yeah.
the spirit of offense comes and tells us, like you should feel a certain way about this. You should react a certain, and it counters our experience. Like everything's been great. It's been great. It's been great. But now I get an offense in my heart that I carry around, and it's really hard to get over that. And then the enemy, the enemy starts whispering those lies to us. They don't care about you. You don't really belong here. Is this even a biblical church?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
I was gonna say the jump there is when you ascribe motives.
Yeah.
It's, nobody reached out to me.
They must hate me.
Yeah, it's the reason is because they don't value me. They don't, it's like, and that's where the enemy comes in and lies to you. But where do you see us, with the church? Where do you see us more gravitate to? People are very easy to say, yes, this is the good of this is the good of the family. I'm willing to sacrifice that.
Like, I just think it's a struggle for everyone. If you're asking, is that an easy thing? No, that is, like, people don't gravitate towards seeing the good,
Sure.
or seeing the best, or viewing something with the other person's best in mind. That's just not our natural inclination. And so when something doesn't go the way we want it to go, then, like, it's immediate. It's, well, they don't like me, and it becomes me. And again, not a judgment. I'm not talking about you. Right? It's somebody else. I'm talking about me.
Yeah.
It's the same thing when somebody says something about the church in general. Well, it's me.
Yeah.
Like, then it becomes about, well, what about me? Well,
Yeah.
and it, like, yeah,
My
it's just
parking
not a good
space
thing.
and my seat.
Yeah, it's just not a good thing.
I would say, at least in our church, I think that, I think the times where it is easiest, I think, for people to rally as a family is when there is an immediate felt need. If we said, this family just, their car just broke down in the parking lot, who's gonna, who would help? I think that you'd see people, come out with $100 bills or whatever and just meet that need. I think that's tangible, and again, I think you feel the immediate benefit of it. Where it's like, hey, I did a good thing. It's like, I think that when we can rally around tangible needs like that, I think it's very easy to do that. It's harder, like when you said, when it's a weekly, this is going to be the music for the rest of my life, or this is going to be, this offense or things like that. But I think that there are times where our congregation can rally easily, but I think it has to be something that's super tangible.
I think a lot of times that tangibility piece is a crisis. We like to help people in crisis. And so, like, that's where you get, Facebook support groups, and you get people like, hey, we're raising money for my friend. Like, if you feel led to, like,
The GoFundMe of it all.
the GoFundMe. And there's an example of something happening right now with a family from our church that people are raising support for them. And, so I just think about, there's been a number of those instances that, like, people get excited about and they want to rally around that. I think you're right. When you think about, even in, like, a family, like you said, where do we think we're more focused on the whole of the family? So I do think, if you have the ability to trust your leadership, right? If you trust the people who know the bigger picture, that makes it easier to get invested for the good of the family. Like, I think about in our own family just last night, the girls were like, hey, can we go here for dinner? Can we go here for dinner? Can we go here for dinner? And I was like, no, we're not eating out. We ate out yesterday. We ate out Sunday. So we're not eating out today. And the bigger picture there is, we know the budget, right? Like, we know how much money we can spend eating out every week.
And how
I
many
know
chicken nuggets we can actually
I
eat.
know that you want that, right? But we have, like, this overall, we've got the bigger picture in mind. Like, we kind of know where we need to play within the boundaries. And so I do think that, like, if we can focus on the whole of the church, right, a lot more easily when we trust our leadership, which is, something that we can do a lot of times here, but we have to choose that, right? We have to choose to do that, to know that there's a bigger picture.
And so, how it benefits the whole, and when you feel like you're part of something bigger, and, like you said, if a car broke down, everybody goes out because you can see it. I don't know if you heard me. I mentioned something about generosity that most people might not have heard, but
That is, yeah.
It was almost
You
like
did?
a side note,
Yeah, I
and it
didn't
just
hear
kind of
that.
glossed over.
Didn't hear that at all.
No, but I talked just a little bit about that whole thing of, like, if I'm financially invested, and and this is where, Like we get so caught up in, I don't want anybody to know what I'm doing. But if you know, hey, I am bought in, I'm tithing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or to know, hey, you know what? They invested $15,000 into the ministry. Like, you're like, really?
Right.
Well, why? Well, here's why. Well, I want to be part of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right? But we don't do that
Yeah.
when it comes to financially supporting the church. We want to play dumb. We want to just do our thing. Don't let anybody else know. And because of that, well, nobody really talks about how blessed they are because
Sure.
they are investing, because they're obedient. And then we have no idea who's giving, who's not giving. And then we look at the bigger picture budget and we're like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, look,
Yeah.
we're in a deficit now.
Right.
Why? Well, because people aren't investing and buying in and helping support the ministry.
Well,
And
we're gonna preach.
that goes back to your first question though. Like we don't talk about with each other our benefits,
Yeah.
right? Of like we've lived a life of tithing. Here's the way that has benefited us because it feels weird,
Yeah.
right? It feels a little braggy or something like that sometimes. So we shy away from that.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like we're gonna have a series later on that we're gonna talk about some of that stuff. But like I said, I think that is one of the areas that we. I don't know. It's one of those things. Like if I could just convince people to do one thing, I think it would be that. It's like, hey, listen, when you start tithing, there's like this weird barrier that comes down between you and the Lord, where it's just like it's this disobedience that it's like it's a constant disobedience, and it's like there's this I don't know, for me, at least for me, it was like this, more of a ownership of who I was as a Christ follower. And then like I said, we've lived our lives either tithing and then giving above that through other generosity and things like that. And the benefit of that, I mean, it's the same thing. If I'm going like, hey, if you will come and help build Habitat for Humanity, it's like, if you will come and do this, well, that's a week off of work and it's and I'm going, but if you just did it once,
Yeah.
you would love it,
Right.
and it's like in trying to convince people that I feel like a conspiracy theorist is like trying to get you off seed oils or something. Like if you would just stop it, you would feel so better, and just, just trying to tell people that. And it's just trying to get them over that first hump. And it's like going, this will benefit you so much, but you feel like a pyramid scheme salesman. But
I'm not going to sell you Amway. I promise.
so, lastly, today I just want to talk a little bit. We talk about fellowship sometimes as that it's just a hangout, right? I grew up in the church in the 80s, 90s. We had a fellowship hall. Yeah, which just meant that's where you ate after church.
Potlucks. That's where you had your potlucks.
Yeah.
Hey, by the way, somebody did ask on Sunday, hey, with all of the hanging out, are we going to do a potluck? And I said, you know how
At your
how
house.
chaotic a potluck would
Oh
be here
my
with
gosh,
1,100
that would
people?
be insane.
Like, that's a lot of potato salad.
I'm just thinking
But
about
have
the
some
gluten-free
people
options.
over to your house.
Yes,
like
exactly.
Just host
That's
your
the-
own. Host
That's
your
the
own.
modern potluck.
If you were in a life group, no. So yeah, so when we're talking about fellowship, sometimes we just think of it as hanging out. Oh, we got together in fellowship. How can we elevate that? Like, what are some tips you think for people where it's like you're having somebody over to your house for a potluck, for a, what is that called, a progressive dinner now? But it's like if you're having something like that, how do you elevate that to something that is glorifying to God? Do you think, other than just we hung out and played video games and ate Doritos and went home?
That sounds terrible.
Sounds amazing.
No, I don't want to do that.
Cool Ranch Doritos.
I mean, it is so simple, yet seems to be so complicated, right? So in the middle of talking about life and kids and jobs and whatever, to simply ask, how has God shown up in your life? Or to simply say, let me tell you something that happened in my life this week, and then God intervened and got me through, and just bring it into a spiritual realm.
Right.
Not completely. It's not like, all right, as we eat our meal, open your Bible. We're going to do a Bible study while we eat. And it's just bringing your spiritual life into your physical life and making them almost inseparable. Okay, going back to Rob Bell.
Everything.
No shout out to Rob Bell. We're not gonna
Old Rob Bell.
the old Rob Bell. But just that all things are spiritual, incredible teaching. But everything that we do should be done for the glory of God. So when you're having people over, how do we make this something that glorifies God? Okay, so play a video game and shoot people for the glory. No, I don't know.
I don't know
No,
if that
can't do
tracks.
it.
I
Yeah.
don't know about that.
I don't play video games.
don't
so I don't
either.
have any idea.
You
what
get put in
do.
the chat and you're like, hey, everybody, do you have a second to talk about my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ?
Yeah, I don't know how that works, but it might not be possible to bring. I don't know, but just to say, hey, this is what's going on in my life, and make it
Well, I think
about
that
their relationship.
you're touching on that right now. Most of the time that people ask you, how was your week? Right? And when was the last time we went, oh my gosh, I was at men's group. I was at Freedom. I was at Rooted. I was at Sunday morning, and it was so great. You know, like, and we say that in response to, how are you doing? How am I doing? Oh man. Like, some people will give the, oh, I'm blessed and highly favored. And I'm like, but you don't say, man, God blessed me this week because I was talking to him and he spoke this to me. It's a really easy in.
Yeah, I have started telling my friends. I said I'm at a point in my life where I don't do small talk anymore. I just don't. I don't like it. It annoys me. So when we went to the women's getaway this year, we started a group chat for the ladies who were riding together in the vehicle I was in. And I told them that. I said, listen, I'm not into small talk. And like, we all actually kind of know each other. So are you guys okay if we dig in a little bit and talk about some more like intent, like real stuff? Like, let's talk about some real stuff. And it's funny how every single woman there were 6 of us. They were all like, yeah, let's do it. Like, let's go. So I think it's interesting that you can, like, most people want more out of their relationships. They want more out of their fellowship. They don't necessarily want to stay on the surface, but we're all so afraid to like dive into this pool of being known and potentially being vulnerable. And, you know, we want to be seen, but we don't know if we want, you know, how much intimacy we want with other people. So like, we don't want to start it, but like we want somebody to do it to us, right?
Yeah.
Like, I love when people ask me, you know, how are things going in your life right now? What's the Lord saying to you right now? You know, what are some things that you've been struggling with or dealing with? Like, how are you working through those? I love those kinds of questions, and I love to ask other people those kinds of questions. You know, like, just what's something, or to ask them to tell you a story, right? Like, what's something that happened this week? You know, how did you work through that? How did you figure out a solution to that? How can I help you? Like, I love questions. I think they're so helpful in digging in.
Yeah. So Monday night, this last night at men's group, I heard a conversation. Somebody said, man, Pastor Rick was really stepping on toes on Sunday. And the response was, he wasn't stepping on my toes. And they're
Yeah.
like, what? And he's
Yeah.
like, no, like it was,
Yeah.
that was all great stuff. It was like,
Yeah.
you know, so it's, if the shoe fits,
Right,
wear
right,
it. But
right.
it was like, no, he was speaking truth. Didn't
Sure.
step on my toes. I'm fellowshipping. I'm digging in.
Yeah.
I'm tithing. I'm like,
Yeah.
like, it was great encouragement, not stepping on my toes.
Sure.
You know, but
Yeah.
that conversation started off with a, hey, that was really rough.
Sure.
Right. And then the other person saying, no, not really. And then taking it a little deeper.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
Yeah. Well, and that's all the thing. It goes back to the very first thing. This should all be beneficial to us.
Right.
And sometimes it's stepping on our toes. You know, if you have to look at your friend and say, you know, hey, you know, like I remember I had to say that to a friend in college once where he was cutting class and I was like, this is going to tank your grade. You know, it's like, this is going to tank your grade, you know, or like looking at your kids and going, you cannot behave like this. I know it cuts a little bit, but the word is offensive and it cuts like a double-edged sword. And so it's one of those things that but we're doing it for your benefit.
Yeah.
Like, this should be something that benefits you in the end.
and so those relationships that are built, and that was one of the points, that fellowship builds relationships. Well, those relationships are built strong so
Yeah.
that we can go deeper. It can develop our faith. We can then invest in things mutually together to
Right.
build the kingdom.
Right.
Right. So it's a beneficial thing for everyone.
Well, and even just that word build, like you think about, yeah, you have to build fellowship. You have to building doesn't happen on accident,
Right.
right? It doesn't just happen if you do nothing. So that takes effort on everybody's part to be able to, you know, put in the work to do that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to talk about more things that benefit us in the next couple weeks as we continue this series. And we hope to see you guys next week here at the 167. And shoot us an email, get a shout out.
Shout outs.
Have a great week, Alan. See you later. If you enjoyed this episode of the 167, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, get notified, leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. Tell all your friends to listen as well. Make sure you go over to newlifegardener.com and check out all that we have to offer as a church, and check out our messages online as well. Thanks for listening.